My name's Karen Rich, and I'm with Cardente Real Estate, and I'm happy to be here to make the retail presentation. We're going to be looking back at 2015 and forward on to 2016. I like to usually just start out by looking at a few retail buzzwords that have become part of our vocabulary over the years. And I'm not going to name all these off right now, but we will get into that a few minutes later when I start talking about some retail trends. But typically we start with looking at the numbers because it really is all about the numbers that shows what's happening for us in retail here. As I get into the numbers, I have to give a big thank you to Mark Malone and Marie Gressick from Malone Commercial Brokers. They gather this data every year and they very generously share it with me. And it's important to this conference, I think, that it is shared because it gives us a continuity to the numbers so that you know that the same criteria is being used year after year. So we're going to start out by looking at the net absorption rate comparison of 2015 to 2014. What's interesting about these numbers is nothing has changed. From the beginning of 2014 to the end of 2014, beginning of 15, end of 15, they're exactly the same. You have 6.46 million square feet in Greater Portland that's available. There was a net absorption rate this past year of about 5,000 square feet, which left a vacancy out of 6,460,000 of only about 232,000 square feet. Very insignificant vacancy rate. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the vacancy rate by type of space. And when this information is gathered, they look at 4 different types of centers. There's the power center, the community center, the strip center, and single-tenanted buildings over 10,000 square feet. And you can see by looking at this slide that it breaks it down and shows you where that 6.4 million square feet is broken up into. And it also shows us what our vacancy rate is for 2015 is a 3.6% vacancy factor, which is kind of along the lines of what everybody's been talking about today. This takes a look at Greater Portland vacancy rate by town. And the Greater Portland is made up of 6 different communities, which are Portland, South Portland, Scarborough, Westbrook, Falmouth, and Cape Elizabeth. When you take a look at the slide, you can see that Falmouth has the highest vacancy rate. Again, sometimes numbers can be a little misleading. That is primarily made up of 1 large vacancy. So that puts them at the 13.7% rate. Then you look at a town like Cape Elizabeth that has very minimal retail space of about 35,000, and they have a 0% vacancy rate. I really like this slide for the local versus national. And part of what I like about it is that it goes back 10 years and kind of shows us clearly what's happened to us along as what's happened nationally. So back in 2005, we were at kind of an all-time low of a 2.94% vacancy factor. At that time, we were pretty close to where we were nationally. And then you can see what happens as we get up to 2009. During the recession, we went up all the way up into almost 11%. But now you can see what's happened locally since 2009 through 2015. We're all the way down at 3.6%, and meanwhile, you have nationally, you're over 12%. So there's a full 9% difference. Part of that can be attributed to the fact that a lot of new building hasn't gone on here, versus nationally you have some inventory that has become older, and so they've built new stores for them, and some of those storefronts stay vacant. You're going to be starting to see that happen a little bit here, I think, in Maine in the upcoming year. This takes a look at some major store closures that took place in 2015 and actually this month in 2016. So last June and July, Radio Shack closed 13 of their stores throughout the state of Maine. Right around Thanksgiving, Tim Hortons closed 9 of their locations in Maine. And this month, Gap is pulling out of the Maine Mall and Bangor Mall, and they're still going to have their outlet store in Freeport. This takes a look very quickly. We're going to look at this of the 2014-15 large vacancies. Remember when I just was talking about the Falmouth is a little skewed? You can see there's a total out of the 6.4 million square feet of only 115,000 square feet total is made up of large vacancies. So that's a really small number, but a big portion, almost more than half of that, is attributed to the one vacancy in Falmouth. I have to apologize for this average lease rates, 2015-14. If anybody wants this is a mistake on here, and I apologize for it. I was in a big hurry to get Shelley my PowerPoint presentation last week and hadn't really gone over it as much as I should have, so my apologies. But basically what's incorrect on these were asking lease rates. The prime market, the range is correct. The actual average was for the primary market was $19.80, not what's reflected there. The secondary market is actually $15.43, and then the overall average is about $17.60. So I apologize for the discrepancy there. This took a look at some new construction and major relocations that happened just at the very end of the year and are about to happen. So at the day after Christmas, Bob's moved from Clark's Pond to Scarborough Gallery, there's a new building built there, multi-tenanted for 115,000 square feet. They moved in, next to move in are gonna be PetSmart, Home Goods, and Marshalls. And that's gonna leave a small vacancy of about 5,600 square feet. So what's happening is that they are leaving Clark's Pond and relocating there. And that's why I'm saying that some of this older space is going to need to be refurbished to attract new tenants. And I think that will happen here because Clark's Pond is just too well located to not have somebody want to come in and refurbish it and redo the parking and that type of thing to make it a better spot. We had a number of new franchises that came into Maine last year, and I think that's always an exciting thing to see happen here. So Dollar General kind of came in with a vengeance and opened up 10 new stores throughout Maine. You had Pink and Carhartt, which moved into the Maine Mall. Tilted Kilt is a new restaurant that Kevin Fletcher put over in the Maine Mall area. European Wax Center went into 85 Western Avenue. Then there's a couple that moved in to the Old Port and downtown Portland were Anthropology and Fat Face. What I love about the Fat Face story is it's a clothier from United Kingdom, and they wanted to come across the Atlantic and open up their first U.S. location, and they chose Exchange Street in Portland, Maine to do that. So I think that's pretty significant to show how well our economy is doing and how attractive we are to retailers. This looks at some relocations and expansions. We had a number of retailers that relocated that may have been already existing here and either moved their stores or added additional stores. In particular, a story I think that's a good story is Sochology moved. They had been down in the city center area for about 10 years, and Matt Cardente from my office moved them up to 511 Congress Street. Ed Gardner had gone in there and refurbished, renamed it Ocean Gate Plaza, refurbished the first floor to make it into retail, and then leased about 10,000 square feet between them and a couple other tenants. So it's, I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen based on what Nate was just talking about, some of these office buildings up in the Monument Square area, perhaps maybe copying that trend. And then this just looks at some other ones that moved and relocated and expanded. Be Good put another one out by Clark's Pond, and Lane Bryant is actually going to be moving from Maine Mall over to the TJ Maxx Plaza. Mainers love their restaurants, and I think that's never been more evident than in 2015. You know, Greater Portland and all of Southern Maine, all of Maine really, is known for its food and its restaurants. And every year we get more and more and more restaurants, and they all seem to be doing well, and they all kind of hit it out of the park. And there's no exception to that this year. We have I have 2 slides, and I haven't even begun to cover all the restaurants that have moved into downtown Portland and surrounding areas. We have a couple that moved, Roustabout and Tika moved into the Washington Avenue area, which I think is also going to help the retail along there as well. Union Restaurant, obviously part of the Press Hotel. Old Port in downtown Portland. I always call Pete Harrington at Malone when I want to talk about Old Port in downtown Portland retail space, because he does a lot of that leasing. And we were talking about the fact that when Anthropology came in and he put them in at the corner of Middle and Pearl Street, is what really happened is it made that whole Middle Street corridor more retail friendly. So when you have a big name like an Anthropology come in, all of a sudden, just even beyond that, now became kind of desirable retail. And Angela Adams moved from up on Congress Street and moved there. Typically we have a almost zero vacancy rate on Commercial Street, 4th Street, and Exchange Street. But what's happening in the Old Port and downtown Portland, like I just mentioned, is that it's the boundaries have really expanded. As we have these zero vacancy rates, people don't just give up and go somewhere else. They just start expanding the boundaries. And that's why when you go across Franklin Arterial now, you can see that there's a lot of retail and restaurants there. It's not like it used to be. So I really do expect that kind of trend to continue. I took a look at some of the southern Maine retail outside of the greater Portland area and talked to all the economic development directors to kind of find out what's going on in their towns. In Freeport, they've had some new and existing retailers relocate. They had one sale that was worth mentioning by them, and also happened to be out of our office. Mike Cardente and Mike Cobb did a call for offers on a property at 186 Lower Main Street, which had been built probably 10 years ago and had never had a tenant. It was going to be leased, and now it got sold. And so that, again, that's on the outskirts of downtown Freeport, and a credit union, Mid-Coast Credit Union, took that, and John Doyon represented them. Wyndham, I just found out today, actually, I didn't have it on my slide, that Rennie's is moving, taking a 27,000 square foot space in Wyndham. And you also had AutoZone went in there, and a couple other restaurants. And they typically have a very low vacancy rate. Saco is starting to, the retail activity is starting to pick up there. Ground Round went into where Cinemagic is, and you have some mill buildings that are being refurbished, both with office and retail and residential. And typically what happens when you have these mill buildings developed for residential, obviously some retail, ground floor retail is going to follow as well. Kind of the story of I think of the suburban market this year is Biddeford. I was amazed when I was talking to their development director how much is really happening in Biddeford. That entire Route 111 corridor has really picked up, not only by the Biddeford crossing area, which is significant, but also from the Turnpike all the way up to 5 Points. You're getting a lot of interest from local and national retailers. But beyond that, you're also seeing a lot of development happening in the mill buildings, residential and retail again, but also in the downtown section from some students, and professional couples are moving into that area. So there is really a very surprising amount of retail going on in Biddeford this year. These are some significant retail sale transactions that took place in 2015. We didn't have anything significant like along the lines of the multifamily market did, but we had a few that were, nice sales. 740 Broadway in South Portland, just over the bridge, that strip center sold for $4 million, and that was handled by Mike Anderson of Paragon and Tom Moulton of Dunham Group. Shops at Longbank in Kennebunk, which is a Hannaford-anchored center, was handled by Greg Perry of Cardente Real Estate and Mike Anderson of Paragon. Sebago Plaza in Wyndham was handled by Greg Perry. Cook's Lobster House, again, a mistake. I apologize. I have the wrong address on there. It's actually Bailey Island. And Topsom Crossing Topsom were sold by John Doyon at Malone Commercial Brokers. And Ryan's Corner House Wells, kind of a brew pub, tavern type of place, their second location was sold by Kirk Butterfield. This takes a look at some of the Greater Portland 2016 developments that are about to get underway or are already underway. Bangor Savings Bank is building a new site down by what used to be the car wash there on Marginal Way, and Chipotle is moving, kind of anchoring the Century Plaza location. And I understand there's some other smaller tenants going in there with them as well. And then CarMax is being developed across from the Maine Mall. I think we've all seen CarMax commercials. Midtown development, I'm told, is about to get underway in 2016. I know they're talking about building 400 residential units, but in addition to that, there's supposed to be 90,000 square feet of first floor retail, which is a significant amount of retail for this, for downtown Portland. So we'll see what happens with that this year. The other kind of big development story for 2016 is Dirigo Plaza, which is on Route 25 at the Portland-Westbrook line. Jay Wise of Wise Commercial Real Estate is handling that. He told me today that there's phase one is about 315,000 square feet. They already have signed letters of intent and leases from 285,000 square foot of retail for that. He's not able to disclose to me exactly, he hasn't gotten the landlord's permission to disclose who they are at this time. Some of them are repositioning from other locations. He told me that there are two new retailers to Maine, kind of smaller restaurant type of people that are moving there as well. And he could confirm that Starbucks is moving there too. E-commerce, I'm not going to go into much about e-commerce because there's just so much to talk about. I will say this, when I was researching this, the one thing I looked up was what does e-commerce account for in terms of retail sales in the United States? Because we keep hearing how they're really hurting bricks and mortar. And it is a significant number. It's $350 billion worth of sales. But what's interesting is that number really only reflects about 7.5% to 8% of all retail sales in the United States. So yes, it is significant, and yes, it does grow every year, but I think it's obvious that, well, I'll get into some of the trends here. So some of the top retail trends in 2015, there's a number of them, and I think that most of them are also true for 2016. And if I had to pick up some that are really seem to be the most important, is that it's this omni-channel strategies that retailers need to embrace and offer to all their customers. People want the opportunity to have your app on their mobile phone. They want to be able to order off of their laptop or their desktop. They want to be able to go out to the bricks and mortar stores and be able to touch it and feel it and go out to lunch or whatever. So it's a combination of offering all of those is going to set certain retailers apart and is going to allow them to thrive. In addition to that, what seems to be, because of I think more of the millennials than the baby boomers maybe, is that this want to feel like you're shopping locally and that and where you're shopping, that those stores have a corporate social responsibility. So it's important for stores to make you feel as if they're investing in your community. They may not be a local store, but they care about you and your community, and they're willing to invest in it. And I think that those trends are going to continue into 2016. Some of the retail, trends for 2016, I don't have much time to go into very many of them, but one of them, again, this omni-channel strategies. They're also seeing more and more of these beacons where they actually reach out to you when you are close to their store and may offer you some incentives to come into your store. You're finding more and more that happens to be the case. I don't know if you happen to be by the mall and all of a sudden you get something on your phone from Macy's. They know that you're shopping there by your phone locator, and they want to get you into their store. So predictions. I I didn't write down any of these predictions. At the time, I hadn't completed them, but this is what I think is going to be happening in 2016 and beyond. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of construction happening. We have very low vacancy rate, and we're going to see a lot of new construction. The other thing I think we're going to see in the coming year and years is more and more new retailers coming to Maine. The retailers that have come here do well, and people recognize that, and they want to be here as well. The other thing I think that's going to happen is that more and more existing retailers and franchises are going to expand. They're going to add on 1, 2, or 3 more stores in outlying areas because their stores are doing so well here. The one trend I haven't talked about at all that I predict is going to happen as well is that these big box stores are really making their prototype stores much smaller than they used to be. They've determined that they need to have a store and they need to have a presence, but they don't need as big of a presence as they used to have. And the other thing I see happening is that not just the asking lease rate, but the actual lease rates should increase slightly based, again, upon the vacancy. So I thank you very much. I'm going to end with an African proverb. If you think you're too small to make a difference, you haven't spent a night with a mosquito. Thank you very much.